Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome all of you present here today for this lecture. I am Dr. Naveed Khan, consultant anesthesiologist at Narayana Health SRCC Hospital at Mumbai. And today I'm going to be talking about the practical aspects of anesthesia for radiological procedures in children. So, modern advances in complex imaging technology offer exceptional diagnostic and interventional capabilities. Over the past decade, requests for anesthesiology in these remote imaging environments have dramatically increased. Magnetic resonance imaging and computed tomography are non-operating room locations that represent significant challenges for the delivery of safe patient care. So what are the challenges specific to non-operating room anesthesia? Limited workspace, inadequate lighting, noisy environment, minimal temperature regulation, electrical and magnetic interference, limited patient access during procedures, lack of skilled anesthesia support staff, older and possibly unfamiliar equipment, and radiation hazards. Challenges and hazards in CT are ionizing radiation and radiocontrast agents, which can be nephrotoxic, causing iatrogenic acute renal failure, also known as contrast-induced nephropathy, especially in patients with pre-existing renal disease. Challenges and hazards specific to the MRI suite. Projectile effect, movement and heating of implantable surgical devices and foreign bodies, effect of metals and other objects on the image quality, thermoregulatory issues like heating and heat loss, MRI chamber pollution by anesthetic gases, IV contrast agent hazards, noise levels and other physiological effects, and quenching of MRI magnets. So what are our goals of sedation and anesthesia in CT and MRI? So the most important goal of pediatric sedation is safety. Also, we have to minimize the physical discomfort and pain while making it possible to do the procedure properly. It entails controlling behavior, that is to minimize negative psychological responses to treatment by providing anxiolysis and maximize the potential for amnesia. And last but not the least, to return the patient to a state in which safe discharge is possible. There is a practice advisory on the anesthetic care for magnetic resonance imaging. This is by the American Society of Anesthesiologists, published in the year 2014. So what they recommend is, first and foremost, the education. They are stressing on the general safety education of all personnel involved on the unique physical environment of the MRI scanner, specific education regarding the specific features of individual scanners within the institution. Education should include information regarding ferromagnetic items and implantable devices that should not be brought into zones 3 and 4 of the MRI suite or should be brought in with caution. Education should also include how to safely respond to code blue situations in the MRI suite. The second recommendation is regarding the screening of anesthesia care providers and the ancillary support personnel. The anesthesiologist should work in collaboration with the MRI medical director or safety officer to ensure that all anesthesia team personnel entering zone 3 or 4 have been screened for the presence of ferromagnetic materials like stethoscopes, pens, wallets, watches, hair clips, etc., any foreign bodies, and any implanted devices like cochlear implants or cardioverter defibrillator devices. Third recommendation is about the patient screening. So for every case, the anesthesiologist should communicate with the patient, referring physician, and the radiologist to determine whether the patient presents with a high-risk medical condition or requires special equipment like physiologic or invasive monitors, intubation, oxygenation, and has been screened for implanted devices and ferromagnetic items. Preparation. In addition to addressing the medical needs of the patient, optimal anesthetic care plan should include the requirements of the scan and the personnel needs, and special requirements or unique issues of patients or imaging study. For example, the duration of the scan, the position of the patient, the area of the body inside the scanner, needs for periods of paused respiration, etc. So, positioning of the anesthesiologist and the patient. The anesthesiologist in the MRI suite at all times should have a clear line of sight of the patient and the physiologic monitors, whether by direct observation or by video camera, and a clear line of sight to the anesthesia machine. Planning for emergencies. Anesthesiologists should ensure that emergency equipment and drugs are immediately accessible. Emergency communication by phone or the code button is immediately available, and an evacuation plan is in place, including an appropriate location outside the scan room. So patient management during MRI. Regarding monitoring, MRI patients should be monitored in a manner consistent with the ASA standards for basic anesthesia monitoring, anesthetic care. Although lighter levels of anesthesia may be appropriate during an MRI scan, the anesthesiologist should be aware that these lighter levels may result in airway complications like laryngospasm, coughing, other airway compromise. And the airway management. The anesthesiologist should have an advanced plan in place to deal with the instrumentation of the airway. Basically, what they're trying to say is that patient management during MRI should be in no way different from patient management during any anesthesia procedure done in the OT. Now, management of emergencies. So when a patient has a medical emergency, like for example, a cardiopulmonary arrest in the MRI scanner, the following should occur. Immediately remove the patient from zone 4 while initiating CPR if indicated, call for help, and transport the patient to a previously designated safe area for resuscitation that is not in zone 4. In case of a fire or projectile emergencies and quench, team members should perform their institution's protocol in reaction to this occurrence. Coming to the post-procedure care, patients receiving sedation or anesthesia within the MRI suite should have access to post-anesthetic care consistent with that provided in other areas of the institution. In all situations, intensive care and recovery areas should include access to vital sign monitors, oxygen, suction, resuscitation equipment, and trained personnel. Patients should be provided oral and written discharge instructions which are clear and legible. So finally, coming to the sedation and analgesia. So sedation is a drug-induced state of depressed consciousness that allows tolerance of an uncomfortable or painful diagnostic or interventional procedure. So it is actually a continuum from minimal sedation to general anesthesia, which takes into account the patient's responsiveness, airway, spontaneous ventilation, and cardiovascular function. So pre-sedation, the pre-sedation assessment. So check whether the child is appropriate for sedation, do a health evaluation like we do for all other cases in the OT, check for the airway, any medical problems and current medications, check the weight. Pre-sedation documentation. Valid written informed consent, verbal and written instructions to a responsible person, NPO status, health evaluation record, and the record of instructions pertaining to current medications. Re-evaluation should be done just prior to sedation in terms of checking pre-sedation documentation, NPO status, respiratory tract infections or fever, medication intake. So there is a very useful acronym, SOAP-ME, for checking the preparation for sedation. So S stands for suction, whereby functioning suction apparatus should be present, suction catheter should be present, oxygen flow meters and oxygen sources should be present. Airway, size appropriate airway equipment, nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal airways, laryngoscopes, blades, endotracheal tubes, stillets, bag valve mask or equivalent devices. P for pharmacy, all the basic drugs needed to support life. M for monitors, functioning pulse oximeter, and other monitors as appropriate for the procedure, and equipment for anesthesia and resuscitation, good lighting and communication. So during sedation, there should always be a person, in addition to the practitioner, whose responsibility it is to monitor appropriate physiological parameters and to assist in any supportive or resuscitation measures if required. Documentation should be on a time-based flow sheet on which vital signs, including levels of consciousness, details of drug administration, and adverse events may be recorded. This flow sheet should be easy to use, complete, and comprehensive. So general guidelines for sedation and anesthesia. What this basically is about is the personnel that are present in the MRI suite. All the personnel training should be competency-based, and all the facilities, personnel, and equipment should be immediately available to treat any emergency situations like vomiting, aspiration, seizures, anaphylaxis, airway obstruction, apnea, cardiac arrest, etc. Every personnel that is involved in giving sedation to the patient should know how to rescue the patient from the next level of anesthesia. That is, those who are performing moderate sedation should be able to recognize and rescue the patient from deeper levels of sedation, and those performing deeper sedation should be able to recognize and rescue the patient from general anesthesia. Also, all the healthcare personnel who sedate children for procedures should have advanced airway training and resuscitation skills. So what are the special considerations for equipments in the MRI suite? MR-compatible anesthetic machines, vaporizers, and ventilators are available. Piped gases and backup cylinders are also available in aluminum vessels. Wires and leads should be made of a braided material with minimal contact with the patient's skin. There should always be a linen between the skin and the wires to minimize skin contact so as to avoid burns. Fiber optic or carbon fiber wiring should be used. Coming to the ECG leads, short and MR compatible ECG leads, preferably less than 15 centimeters in length, should be used, and electrodes to be used and placed in a narrow triangle on the patient's chest. So burns related to pulse oximeters have been noted. Therefore, MR compatible oximeter should be used and cables should be placed as far away from the scanner as possible. Blood pressure monitoring with compatible pressure transducers and plastic connectors. Longer lines are needed for capnography, and therefore we must anticipate delays of about 20 seconds or more for the expected EtCO2 values. MR-compatible laryngoscopes should be used, and in cases where endotracheal intubation is done, the pilot balloon of the ET tube, which has a small ferromagnetic spring, should be taped away from the area to be scanned. So coming to our sedation strategies. A sedation plan analyzing the requirements for analgesics, anxiolytics, or both is necessary and will vary depending on the procedure and the anxiety of the patient or family. Psychological techniques to allay anxiety, cuddling, parental support, warm blankets, and a gentle, reassuring voice and hypnosis are extraordinarily useful adjunct plans to the sedation. So especially in children who are above 5 to 6 years of age who can understand, it's very important if we actually prepare them and give them an idea of what they have to expect in the MRI suite, like the cold atmosphere or the loud noise. And if they're already prepared, we can probably minimize our sedation requirements. And for patients under 3 months of age, the feed and wrap technique is often used very successfully. What this means is neonates and babies less than 3 months of age, we give them feeds, we wrap them well, and allow them to sleep naturally, and then complete the scan during their natural sleep. So see, this is a toy MRI machine. This is used for explaining to children what they're supposed to be expecting in the MRI suite. Also abroad, life-sized MRI machines are available, toy machines. So wherein children can actually go inside, sleep, and then see how they feel. They are very well mentally prepared before going into the scan. So what are the drugs that we use? Propofol 1 to 2 mg per kg IV bolus or 100 to 200 microgram per kg per minute IV infusion. This is an ideal agent for non-painful diagnostic procedures. Midazolam 0.5 to 0.75 milligram per kg per orally, 0.25 milligram per kg intranasally, or 0.025 to 0.5 milligram per kg IV. It is safe for both per oral, nasal, and IV route. Paradoxical reactions are not infrequent though, and intranasal route can be quite irritating. Triclofos, also generally known as pedicloral, dose is 25 to 50 milligram per kg up to 1 year, 250 to 500 mg for 1 to 5 years, and 500 to 1000 mg for 6 to 12 years per orally. This is still the most popular drug for sedation in radiology, and prolonged sedation and paradoxical reactions are reported. Ketamine, so 1 to 2 milligram per kg IV or 3 to 4 milligram per kg IM. Highly effective analgesia and sedation for painful procedures. Nausea and vomiting is a common complaint post-procedure. Laryngospasm and copious saliva is reported, for which we anyways pre-medicate with glycopyrrolate. It's best combined with an anticholinergic for secretions. Midazolam may be useful in an attempt to decrease the emergence dysphoria. So many people also use nitrous oxide, 50% in 50% oxygen by nasal prongs, can also go up to 70%. And this is usually used along with some anesthetic gas like sevoflurane. Dexmedetomidine in a dose of 1 microgram per kg IV bolus with 0.5 to 0.7 microgram per kg per hour infusion It affords excellent cardiovascular stability with no respiratory depression. It can also be given intranasally, 2.5 to 3 microgram per kg. Onset is within 20 minutes. The effect lasts for around 40 to 50 minutes. It's not irritant to the nerves and does not cause dysphoria. Some drugs which can be used in combinations, like propofol with fentanyl, is best for deep sedation and anesthesia and analgesia, but there is a risk for requiring advanced airway management. Midazolam with fentanyl is the most common combination for sedation and analgesia used in emergency departments. And again, hypoxia and apnea is significant. So a little bit about cardiac CT and MRI. The challenges for cardiac CT and MRI in infants and children are magnified significantly as smaller structures are being imaged. In addition, faster heart rates and regular breathing do not allow good image acquisition. The lesions most commonly sought by MRI and CT are the ones that lie beyond the reach of the echo probe, like coarctation, vascular rings, aortic arch abnormalities, pulmonary branch artery stenosis. Also, less relevant in pediatrics, but MRI can be used to assess the wall motion, ischemic heart disease, evaluation of the myocardial viability. So why is this more challenging is because these children frequently require general anesthesia with controlled ventilation and strict heart rate control. They are already compromised because they have some complex congenital heart disease. Induction and maintenance of general anesthesia for cardiac MRI are governed by similar principles for any anesthetic technique in children with heart disease. That is why a thorough understanding of the pathophysiology of each disease process and knowledge of the effects of various anesthetic agents on ventricular function is essential. Dexmedetomidine is an excellent drug in these cases because we usually require a lower heart rate. And so we usually use drugs like dexmedetomidine or propofol. And in case, even with these, if it is not being controlled, the heart rate is not below the required limit, then beta blockers, especially short-acting beta blockers like esmolol, are used for heart rate control. Coming to MRI for critically ill patients. So performing MR scans in critically ill patients is a considerable challenge because the patient is usually on the ventilator, has multiple infusions going on. So urgent diagnostic MRI in the critically ill patients is generally limited to neuroimaging, where rapid treatment will have a substantial effect on patient outcome. In other situations, the risk associated with the investigations may outweigh the benefit, and the scan can be deferred until the patient is less unwell, or we could go for other imaging modalities like CT. And especially for critically ill patients, lines for IV infusion should be long enough to allow infusion pumps to be located in a safe area while scanning if you do not have MR safe infusion pumps. Okay, coming to CT-guided interventional procedures. Usually CT-guided biopsy procedures are for biopsy of mediastinal masses. Challenging. These are challenging because the inability to keep CP bypass machines or rigid bronchoscopy standby in the NORA setting. CT-guided orthopedic procedures like drilling of tumors like osteoid osteomas, bisphosphonate injections usually require repeated CT scans, which increases the radiation exposure. Longer circuit tubings are required due to extreme movements during the scan, which increase the dead space. And for these procedures too, monitoring and anesthesia machines should be at par to those in the operation theater. So this is a 10-year-old child undergoing a CT-guided biopsy of a vertebral lesion. So as we can see, the patient is placed prone, and this is being conducted under TIVA completely. Because it was an older child, we could manage it in TIVA. So about the post-sedation care. Patients should be in a special recovery area with a functioning suction apparatus and the ability to provide 90% oxygen or more via bag and mask. The vital signs should be recorded every 15 minutes. Post-procedure and post-discharge status should be assessed and discharge criteria clearly enunciated and strictly adhered to. Discharge criteria. Before discharging from the MRI or the CT, you should ensure that the cardiovascular parameters are stable and satisfactory. Airway patency is ensured and satisfactory. Child is easily aroused and protective reflexes are intact. Patient can speak if age appropriate. Patient can sit or walk with assistant if age appropriate. Pre-sedation levels of consciousness is achieved and hydration is adequate. So coming to a few interesting cases. As you can see, this is an MRI of a 2-year, 10 kg child he had a middle mediastinal mass measuring 6 into 5 into 5 centimeters, which was compressing both the bronchi below the carina. As you can see in the first scan, the bronchi are very much compressed. So we could not do an MRI for this patient because he was just unable to lie supine. He had a lot of subcostal retractions and oxygen requirement. So we first proceeded with the chemotherapy, and then he was taken for a CT guided biopsy after the chemotherapy. The procedure was done in a prone position, and dexmedetomidine and ketamine was used, and we maintained spontaneous ventilation. This is an 8-month-old child, operated case of tracheoesophageal fistula, who had come for MRI brain. He underwent CT brain under oral sedation, which showed stenosis in the tracheal region at the site of the fistula, and then he was posted for MRI brain. He had suprasternal retractions, but we could manage the scan with IV ketamine, 1 mg per kg, oxygen, and sevoflurane given via nasal prongs. We have seen in our setup that sevoflurane given by nasal prongs actually works pretty well, and we do not require to give a lot of IV sedation for these patients. They come out of anesthesia very well. Of course, the concern remains of the pollution by anesthetic gases in the MRI suite. So this was a 3-month-old child with suspected tongue hemangioma for evaluation. So as we can see, there was a huge mass on the mouth, on the tongue, and there was a risk of upper airway collapse and airway obstruction under anesthesia. So what we did for this child is that we kept supraglottic airway devices and nasopharyngeal airways standby, but we could manage the procedure with ketamine, maintaining spontaneous respiration. This is a 2-year-old child with who was a known case of Pierre-Robin syndrome, also having TM joint ankylosis. The patient had very little mouth opening, but the MRI was performed successfully with a small dose of IV ketamine, oxygen, and sevoflurane with nasal prongs. So these are just some of the other children that we have had. So meaning to say that we get many children for MRI procedures who are syndromic, or as we can see in the case of this child, who are obese. And every patient is going to present a unique challenge. We already have challenges in place because of the unfamiliar environment of the MRI suite, and patients like these who are also unstable. So I guess the take-home message from this presentation should be that the key to performing safe MRI and CT anesthesia should be that first and foremost, that we should be very, very well prepared, anticipating all the emergency situations that can arise, anticipating all the difficulties that can arise. Secondly, the personnel that is involved in these environments should be very well trained. They should be constantly educated. There should be constant training, and there should be a good communication between the team. And also, last but not the least, of course, constant vigilance, which is going to save many lives. And I thank you all for your patience and attention.